help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I have an appointment for tomorrow, but I forget what time it was. Can you help me find that?
Hold on a sec. Your appointment is scheduled for tomorrow, February 17th at 3 p.m. If you need any further assistance, just let me know.
Yeah, can you do me a favor and reschedule that to 2 p.m. instead?
Give me a moment. Your appointment has been successfully rescheduled to tomorrow, February 17th at 2 p.m. If you need anything else, feel free to ask.
Awesome, thank you, that's all. Wow, so that was really powerful. That was just an example, a demonstration of an AI agent that I created in order to handle appointment booking actions, but not only appointment booking actions, also cancellation, rescheduling, and general questions about appointments of callers. So if you look at my screen here, I have sort of two workflows here. Really, the top half that's highlighted in green is the AI agent that we're using at the moment. The bottom half is just a representation of a workflow that I've created in the past that's more linear and more reactive, where we've sort of defined the path of what happens in order to book an appointment on a call. Now, there's sort of two schools of thought when doing this. There's more than two, but the two that I'm talking about here is you have sort of this agentic approach, however you pronounce it, and then you have the reactive linear approach. And there's pros and cons to both. Just to highlight a few, the agentic approach kind of makes decisions on its own. It's sort of true automation, leveraging AI. You've given it tools, it's able to decide when and where to use those tools and make decisions based on what it has at its disposal, which is extremely powerful. Another pro is that it kind of removes the need to understand the programmatic thinking or the logical outcomes of every single scenario. So if you look at the situation we have here at the bottom, we're sort of having to define what happens if success, if error. We have to specifically format data, in certain scenarios. And this one reactive linear booking agent only accounts for booking a new appointments and also checking for scheduling conflicts so that it can suggest some new times. That's all it's doing. It's not able to update existing appointments. It's not able to reschedule, cancel existing appointments, or gather contact ID and stuff. So I think that there's a case for the linear version, and there's also a case for the agentic version. Now, the agentic version does have some cons, though. One of them that I've seen in testing is that you can sort of get unpredictable results. So because you're relying on AI, you sort of have this model here. We're using the Gemini Flash 2.0 model, but you can use OpenAI's, GPT-4o or 3.0 mini, whatever they come out with a new one every day. But you're sort of hostage to how the AI thinks of this. And also you are very susceptible to your own prompting. So if your prompting's poor, then the agent's probably going to react poorly. And the agent doesn't take a predictable path every single time. So it may use the tools in a different way every single time. If your prompting's really good, then it's going to kind of keep a handle on that. But you're going to have to do some testing. So it's unpredictable at times. Also, if LLMs change on the back end, like most recently, OpenAI made some changes when they released their new model, and people were complaining about performance or performance degradations whenever they made that transition. They were suspecting that OpenAI may have weakened their older model to promote their newer, more efficient model. But I'm not sure how much of that was true, but if that does happen, or if the service does go down, then your agent is also going to be affected. Whereas if you had a linear workflow, you may get away with, without those changes, unless you're using AI in that linear workflow like I am here as well. Another thing that's nice about the agentic workflows is sort of you can tell it in its main prompt, and we're going to go over all this inside this tutorial, but you could tell it in its main prompt how the data needs to be structured, how it needs to be formatted, and it does a pretty good job at putting that data in the right format before it sends it off to an API. Like here, we're using GoHighLevel as our backend, sort of our online calendar, and we're using API calls in order to accomplish all the functions of the tools that I've set out for this AI agent. And the AI agent does a good job so long as I tell it how to format the information that the GoHighLevel API is expecting. It will do a good job at putting it together. So what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to, all this is going to be available for download for free, and there's going to be a link below. So you don't have to like stop. I do recommend that you watch this all the way through so you understand what the tool is doing. There is a lot of complexity in here, and so watch it so you understand it, but you don't sort of have to copy and paste on your own and pause the video and take 2 hours to figure it out. You can download this as a JSON, and then whenever it comes time for you to work on this, you can just import from file and then bring it into your N8N account. So by the end of this video, you should be able to set this up for you. Now for the voice agent, I am using the voice API. This is just a voice provider. There are a bunch of other ones like Synthflow, Retail, Assistable. There's a bunch, or you can just use 11 Labs, and whatever you do, you just need to get the information, the tool call information. Anytime you're telling it to book an appointment, you just need to get that information to N8N using a webhook, and then being able to respond to that webhook. So I'm going to show you how to do this with the voice API, but it's really platform agnostic so long as that tool has the functionality. So what I'm going to do here really fast is I'm actually just going to delete this so we can get it out of our way. I don't want you getting confused. The only thing that we're worried about here is this AI booking agent. And so first things first, I'm going to go over how I build a tool inside of VAPI. And it's important because once I call, so if you look at this sort of AI agent I have, it's very simple. This is the system prompt. You're an appointment assistant. Your job is to help callers with appointments or appointment related actions. And here are just 2 rules. Carefully listen to the result of the tool call, and then also if they request a time slot that's not available, just request 2 alternative times closest to the original requested time. Now inside of our agent, when we run this get slots module, we actually get a bunch of slots sent back, and I just don't want the agent explaining every single slot. Just, hey, give them the 2 closest to the time that they originally requested. But let's go in here and I want to show you how the tool is configured. So if you come in here to your VAPI, click on tools, you see I have this appointment agent tool. And in here I have the webhook right here, and this is the production webhook because I have this live. And so if I come into this webhook, I get this production URL from here, I copy this, and then that's what I'll paste whenever I'm creating the new tool. When you're creating a tool from scratch, it sort of prompts you, it puts you through sort of a wizard of how to figure this out, and this server URL, that's where you would copy and paste it in there. Furthermore, if we come down to details, we have details of the tool. So the name of the tool is appointment agent, and then the tool description. It's an agent used for the following appointment actions: get appointment details, book a new appointment, update an existing appointment, and cancel an appointment. I can be more verbose, I can be more descriptive in here if I wanted to. It would probably help, but for the sake of demonstration, I just wanted to get a minimum viable product out there so that I can demonstrate to you. Now here we have some structured data, and structured data is just information that's going to get sent via that webhook to our tool so that the tool can pick apart that information and use it when it's using its tool. So pretty simple stuff. We just want to get the name, the appointment action, like, hey, what are they calling to do in reference to their appointment? Existing appointment, if there was an existing appointment, like say, hey, we're calling to reschedule an existing appointment, give me the time and the day for that existing appointment. And then if they're calling to request an appointment, give me the time of the day in natural language to request that appointment. And that's it. We're just going to leave it at that. So I'm not going to add anything. That I just wanted to show you that tool. Now, if we come into our assistants and we go into our appointment booking test, go to functions, you see that we've listed that function here, appointment agent. That's the name of the tool that we just created. And it is selected from here. And then we are just going to click publish, make sure it's saved. And at this point, assuming that your webhook is correct and your prompt is configured, we should be able to call this agent and have it do things, but we're not going to do that just yet. I'm going to walk you through how I configured this, this AI agent. So first things first, the webhook. So when you come in here, when you're testing, you're going to be using the test URL. So because I've already created this and I'm using it in production, I am using the production URL. The HTTP method is post. The path, I'm not going to make any changes to. No authentication. If you wanted to make authentication, you can configure that. It'd be more secure. And then response, what we want to have is we are using a webhook node to respond. And what that does, instead of, if you don't have this part selected, it's really important. As soon as the tool gets called from VAPI, it's just automatically going to return a response. And then it's kind of just going to close the loop there. And then the tool's not actually going to be able to give its result back to the voice assistant. So what you're telling it to do here is like, hey, do your thing, hit the AI agent, use your tools, and then respond using a webhook response. And if you notice right here, I have this respond to webhook workflow, and we'll come back to this, but this respond to webhook workflow sort of tells it how to respond to the voice API agent. So all that stuff, the specs for that can be found in the API for VAPI, but again, you can export this, import this into your own workflow, and then use it. In here, we have GoHighLevel account info, and this is just a demo account for me, but I choose to set my calendar ID and my location ID inside here, just so that I don't have to keep mentioning these same values, these sort of random strings inside of every single tool. I'll just set them in the beginning and then move on. And this is helpful because if I deploy this for multiple clients, then I can just clone this workflow and then put in their calendar ID and put in their location ID and then move on. So I set them in here and then I reference them later in tools, as you'll see. Now, probably the most important portion right here is the actual booking agent. This is the brain of the entire operation. And so what primarily drives this brain is the system prompt. And so we're going to skip over sort of this. I mean, up here you have, this is a tools agent, and then we are going to define the prompt below. And so instead of using chat trigger node, we're not connected to a chat trigger. We're just going to define it below. I'm going to skip over the user prompt for right now. It's pretty simple, but I'm going to focus here on the system message. And again, this will be provided to you to download for free. So no need to like stop and try to copy this. But essentially, I used OpenAI to help me put this together. I kind of came up with a prompt by myself, and then I had OpenAI optimize it. But I'm telling it what it is. Hey, you're an AI-powered appointment booking assistant. Your task is to handle caller requests related to appointments, including booking, rescheduling, and cancellations. And then I'm just sort of giving it some information on what to expect as far as information coming in or data coming into the AI agent. And then I'm giving it some rules. Hey, here are some formatting rules, very important. Phone numbers, you need to be in this E.164 format with a +1 as default unless otherwise specified. That's the phone number format that the GoHighLevel API is expecting. Convert requested appointments into ISO 8601 timestamps. That is another specification of the GoHighLevel API. If you don't know where to find that information, you can come in here, you can Google GoHighLevel API. This is the version 2 API. And all the specifications are outlined in here. And now what you can do is continue. There's some more formatting stuff here, and then available tools. We just give it a brief description of what tools the AI agent has at its disposal. Hey, you can search contacts, you can create appointments, you can get slots, you can get appointments for contact, and you can update an existing appointment. And then here are some rules. I'm not going to read these verbatim, but as you can see, we have sort of rules laid out for it. You can modify this to suit your needs. And then finally, I also include this variable here, which is the current time. So AI doesn't do a really good job at telling time. And so you have to give it the current time so it knows what to relate the information to, especially when a human comes in and gives a relative time in natural language, like tomorrow at 2 p.m. If the AI doesn't know what the current time is, then it will come up with some weird times and, give you stuff in the past. In the future, it has a mind of its own. And so very simple. One of the most important parts that I had to do here was give it an example for time conversions. And so earlier in the prompt, I told it, hey, you need to format date and times this way. But one of the more complicated conversions is the epoch time in milliseconds. So whenever we go to get open slots, GoHighLevel requires us to give it the start date and the end date and epoch time in milliseconds. Now, I'm not going to go over what epoch time is. But it's essentially a number that looks like this that has to be calculated, and AI can do that for you. But again, if you don't give it examples, it kind of just gets lost and it doesn't calculate it correctly. So this probably isn't nuanced or specific to GoHighLevel. I'm assuming most applications that deal with date and time require epoch time in some form or fashion. So this is just a good universal tip: provide the AI an example. Down here for chat model, you notice we are using Google Gemini, and I think this is free. I set it up a while ago, but if you ever have a question on how to connect, chat models, whether it's OpenAI, Google, DeepSeek, or whatever, there's a ton of information out there. But if you just click on this docs button here, it'll kind of walk you through. The N8N docs are pretty descriptive on what it is you need to do. I've already got mine set up, and I'm using Gemini 2.0 Flash. One, I was just curious and testing, but two, I kind of did a comparison in speed. And Gemini 2.0 Flash was impressively faster than OpenAI, Claude, and I think I used, that's it, OpenAI and Claude. I kind of compared the three, and it was a lot faster, so I just stuck with it. Next thing we have here is memory. So this is an optional buffer, but what I do here, what memory buffer is the agent's ability to have context, to remember conversations, right? And so what you have to do here in the memory buffer is you actually have to tell it, like, hey, how am I going to identify this sort of memory space? And what I did here was inside of the webhook, I'll show you whenever we make our next call, but there is this value called the call ID. And so that is the ID, a unique ID for the specific call that's happening. And so all I really want it to do, I want the AI agent to know the context of that specific call. I don't care for it to memorize context, of like prior calls per se. That's probably doable here. I just really care about, like, hey, if somebody calls and asks, hey, when's my appointment tomorrow? It can go ahead and tell them, hey, your appointment's tomorrow at 3 p.m. And then if the person says, can you cancel that for me? It knows that it's referencing the appointment for tomorrow at 3 p.m. instead of having to ask, hey, what's the appointment again, and kind of put it in this infinite loop of like, give me more information. So that is the memory buffer, totally optional. You can test with or without it. And then we have these tools. But before we go into these tools, I want to show you what's in the user message. And so we went over the system message earlier, and that's under here in options, right? So if you don't have it, you would just, right here, it would be system message. And that's what I clicked to get this system message prompt. The system message is very important. The user message is also very important because what that is doing, it is actually giving us, it's giving the AI the information from the call. And so this just looks like variables right now. So let me try to pull up a prior execution here so you can see what it actually looks like. Let's copy that to the editor. And if I come in here, you can see that this stuff's all greened up. Now, if you're unfamiliar with N8N and sort of how variables are used or expressions, you notice I don't have this at fixed. I have this set to expressions, which allows me to drag and drop information from the nodes that were previously executed and put them in this sort of this word editor here. So if you come in here, you look at, let's see if we can find some of these. So the name, right? We want the name of the contact, and the name of the contact was provided inside of this webhook. And so if we scroll down, you could see here in a few different places, we have this name right here, Justin, because on the call I said Justin. And so if I wanted to reference that inside of the user prompt, I would just drag and drop this, and then you'll see right here that Justin was put in, and I didn't have a space here. So you can see over here it is rendered as the actual value. So I'm not going to do that, but essentially I went through that webhook and pulled out the information, that structured data essentially. I just picked it apart and I dragged and dropped it in here so that I can tell the AI, hey, I gave you the system prompt and here's the information I need you to work with. It's the name, the phone number, the appointment action, and the requested appointment. So that's pretty simple. And before we go into the tools, I want to show you, I mentioned that we are using the the GoHighLevel version 2 of the API. And that's important because it can be pretty complicated to set up the version 2 of the API. You have this OAuth 2 process, but GoHighLevel has made it very simple for you to do this now. Just recently, they released an update where they allow you to create private integrations, which gives you the ability to generate an API key and just use it as if you used any other like version 1 API. If you're unfamiliar with APIs, this is probably a bit of an advanced topic for you. I recommend you do some more research on APIs, what they are and how to use them, but essentially it's just how programs talk to each other. And the key, the authentication key, is just sort of like a password for the programs, just to make sure just somebody random isn't, making changes to your system. So if you come in here, I'll go into settings and then scroll down to private integrations. And if you see here, I have a few keys configured. If you don't have this, which you probably don't, what you're going to want to do is come into create new integration. You can name it whatever you want, click next. And then you have scopes. Scopes are the permissions that are associated with that key. So if you want it to be able to do, let's say, view calendars and edit calendars, you would have to give it the permissions. If it lacks the permissions, you're going to get a ton of permissions errors. And so I'm going to show you what permissions were actually required. So what I'll do here, though, is create the key just so you can see. This is an example key. I'm going to delete this key. But this key, what's important to note is that it's only shown once. And so you want to copy that off, and then you want to be able to reference it later on whenever you're creating the authentication, when you're creating the credential inside of N8N. And so just remember that once you close this, you won't be able to see it again. So you're going to want to copy it off, keep it somewhere safe and somewhere that you can reference while you're developing. So we're going to go ahead and close that. And let me just delete this key so that I don't have junk in here. But I'll show you the scopes of what we use for this one application. So if I click here on edit and click next, here's what I used. I used view contacts, view calendar events, edit calendar events, view calendars, and edit calendars. And that is it. So you notice here I can add scopes, I can remove scopes, but I can't see the key. So the key is not in here. If I lost that key, I would have to I'd have to recreate a new one, which is not a huge deal, but it's just a little bit annoying. Now, if we come in here and look at our first tool, which is search contacts, this is this is where it gets complicated, and stick with me. I'm not going to explain it or show you exactly how I create every single one because that would take hours, but essentially know that I'm using the GoHighLevel API documentation in order to create these HTTP requests. And so if you look at tools here, you can create a HTTP request tool and you sort of have a blank slate. You have to use your documentation here and sort of transpose what needs to be, what GoHighLevel is expecting. And so let me go ahead and delete that. And so let's pop into search contacts. So descriptions here, important for you to describe what this tool does. I'm actually going to do some experimentation where instead of defining the rules and everything inside of this description, I'm going to, or inside of the system prompt, I'm going to do it in the description and see how well the tool performs so we can minimize our system prompt and then just beef up what the actual tool knows about itself. If you come over here, you have the URL, which is found inside of the GoHighLevel API documentation. And then here is where we have our credentials. So if we come in here and we create a new credential, if you've never created a credential before, this is where you would be. We'll start up here at the top and name it something like GoHighLevel test. And then the name is going to be authorization. Spelling and case sensitivity is very important here. This is a very case sensitive operation and there can't be extra spaces or anything. So very important. So come in here to value. I want you to click expression so you can see what you're doing. We are going to type bearer and capital B space, and then your API key will go here. And that is going to be copied and pasted verbatim, no spaces before, no spaces after. Note that there is a space between bearer and API key, and then you would just click save, and then you would reference that. I'm going to delete this one, close. But you would reference that in here. So for authentication, you would say generic credential, header authentication, and then that auth token would pop up in here in your list right here. Okay. So for searching contacts, there is a specific schema or format that's required. So if we pop in here and we look at search contacts, let's see if it pops up. There you go, search contacts. This one I actually believe I found, it's kind of like not really documented in here, but I found it using AI. But essentially what we need to do is pass in a query. We have a version that's typically provided for us in here. And then, and that's important to note, you see that V, case sensitive. Everything is case sensitive whenever you're dealing with programs. It's best to, even if it's not, it's best to adhere to that. If you look here in the body, we're sending a field called query, and then we're telling the program that, hey, let AI come up with a query. But if you remember in the system prompt, I told it, I didn't read everything verbatim, but I told it, hey, query either by the phone or query by the email address to find the contact. And if you notice in that last execution, it queried by the phone number, and then the response was all this contact information, excuse me. So there's the contact information. Now, page limit here, if you noticed, well, let me skip over the location ID. So the location ID, remember we set that earlier in the set node right here. So all we were doing is we were referring to that in the location ID. So if we come down here to location ID, and if I come to mapping and look at my set node, which is right here, all it is me dragging and dropping this into here. And so I've already done that, so I'm not going to do that again. And then page limit, I'm just limiting it to 1. If you noticed, I used this method called number method function. I'm not sure which one it is, but essentially I'm saying, hey, I'm providing the number. I'm providing 1 as the result. This is how many pages I want it to return. I just want it to return 1. But if I just put the number 1 in there, then it would put it in as what's called a string, and we actually need it to be a number or an integer. And so that's how you make sure that it is a number. It's just a nuance of how or it's what GoHighLevel expects as far as formatting goes and data formatting goes. And then optimize response. So response is JSON. I'm not even sure that this is required, but I'm going to leave that there for now because I don't want to break it. Next thing we have is create contact. And so here, again, we reference the GoHighLevel documentation. We put our auth type in there. We have our version. Very important for you to actually reference the page that is for that endpoint, that API endpoint. So if I go to create contact and click here, you'll see that there's a version listed. Just always reference that version, because if it's incorrect, then there's a chance that that tool is going to fail. Next thing we have here is the body. So name, I told it, hey, let the model provide it, the AI agent provide it, but it's optional. You don't actually need a name to create a contact. Phone number, hey, this is required. And the reason I said this is required, technically you can do it by email, but because this is a phone call, I know I'm always going to have the phone number. So at a minimum, provided by the model, but this is required. So at least at a minimum, send the phone number, and then the location ID is again as we defined it in the last node. So slots, this one is an interesting one. So here in slots, we also reference the GoHighLevel API documentation, but if you notice here in the URL, if I come in here to get slots, get free slots, you notice that the calendar ID is referenced inside of the endpoint URL, which is right here, and there's kind of like a placeholder in there for it. Well, I have the calendar ID because I set it before in my set node, and so that set node right here has a calendar ID. I just carefully dragged and dropped it in between my 2 forward slashes, and that's how the calendar ID is put in there and referenced every time this tool is called. Credentialing is the same. And then this time, if you pay specific attention to the documentation, there isn't a body, but there are query parameters. And that is that start and end date in that funky number called the epoch time in milliseconds. And so right here, I have start date by the model, it's required, and end date by the model, and it's required. And in my system prompt for this AI agent, I told it exactly how to format it. I even provided it an example, if you remember. So that's exactly how I want to make sure it gets put. Headers, down here is the version. So if we come in here, we notice that there is a version for headers, and here it is. And that is it. Now, create an appointment. This one has placeholders, I believe, and so this will be an important, let's see, no, this one doesn't have placeholders. Okay, I'll explain what placeholders are here in a second, but creating an appointment, I'm not going to bore you to death. This is exactly reference the documentation, rinse and repeat. Make sure you get the required information in here. Here's the version, and in the body, we have the calendar ID using the calendar ID variable here, location ID using the location ID variable here, and then contact ID is provided by the model, and it is required. So the model is smart enough to know, hey, if I need to get the contact ID and I don't already have it, I have to go use my search contacts tool. It'll provide me the contact ID, and then I can run this create appointment tool. Pretty freaking cool. And now start time, that's all that's required. It knows how to format that start time, and it's by the model, and it is required. Next thing is get appointments for contact. So here we start to use placeholders, and placeholders are a little bit different, but they're not incredibly complicated. If you notice right here inside of this endpoint URL, I have this little contact ID in squiggly brackets. It's important to note it's only one squiggly bracket and not two squiggly brackets, and that's what's known as a placeholder. And if you see here, we have this yellow tip, which is telling us, hey, you can use placeholders for any part of the request to be filled in by the model. It provides more context, or provide more context about them in the placeholder section. So if we scroll down to this placeholder section, we have this placeholder called contact ID, and it's case sensitive. I made it contact ID camel case, so the I is capitalized here, and that's the same way I refer to it here in the endpoint URL. And then in the description, I just said, hey, this is the contact ID for the user in our CRM, and I think I even tell it to use search contacts to receive it. I should put retrieve it in there. Cool. And then it's a string. You can honestly leave it not specified if you want, but it's a string. It's a series of numbers and letters, and so that's how we want to pass it in. But that's how you use placeholders, and that will be able to retrieve context. If you see in here, the contact ID was automatically put in. This is a prior execution that I had, and the contact ID was automatically placed in. It went out and it got it with the search context tool, and then the response is here as shown. This is the nice thing about the agentic workflow is I don't actually have to worry about, you see all these dash ends or these backslash ends. These are new line characters. These formatting can be funky. Making sure you parse that and maybe replace that can be important, but when I'm using the agentic workflow, it's sort of smart enough. The AI agent is smart enough to parse that data appropriately and pull out the relevant information that it needs. Last thing is here, updating an existing appointment. If you notice here, these are just tools that we're using in order to accomplish our mission or to build our agent. And so in here, very simple, referencing the GoHighLevel documentation. If we come in here, this is our endpoint, and we're using a placeholder one more time, which is the event ID. And we tell it down here in the placeholder section, hey, this is the event ID. Here's the description, and use this tool to get the event ID. That tool is also described inside of the system prompt, and so maybe it's redundant, maybe it's not, but be descriptive where you can so that the AI has all the information it needs to be successful. So if we come back up here, we have our standard authentication, we have our headers, we have our body, which is start time because we are updating an existing appointment. Here I have it provided by the model, but it's optional. Why do I have it as optional? Well, maybe somebody's calling to update the appointment, but the update to the appointment is actually canceling the appointment. And in that situation, they won't have a start time because they're just canceling it. They're not rescheduling it. And then the same for appointment status. So the appointment status is going to be canceled if they call to cancel the appointment. But if they're calling to update the appointment, then they don't need to provide an appointment status. They just need to provide a start time so we can reschedule it. And once that is done, once the tool kind of performs its functions, it's going to come over here and it's going to respond to the voice API and sort of give it the information. Okay, I've updated your appointment for February 17th at 2 p.m., right? So that goes back to the voice API, and then the voice AI agent interprets that and gives it to you conversationally. So that is the entire workflow. We're 32 minutes in. I'm going to do some testing, so I'm going to actually make a call and see if this is working as we expected. So let me go ahead and save it because we did make some changes. Let me delete everything out of here. I'll unpin this data, save, and then let's go ahead and call it.
How can I help you today?
Hey, I have an appointment for tomorrow, but I forgot what time it's at. Do you mind looking it up for me?
Could you please provide me with your name so I can look up your appointment details?
Sure, it's Justin.
This'll just take a sec. Unfortunately, I can't look up appointment details directly with just your name. If you can provide me with your phone number or any other information associated with your appointment, I can try to find it for you.
Yeah, it's actually the phone number that I'm calling
Great.
from.
One moment. Your appointment is scheduled for tomorrow, February 17th, 2025 at 2 p.m. If you need any further assistance, feel free to ask.
Yeah, can you help me just cancel that appointment? I'm not going to be able to make it.
Could you please provide... It seems like you want to make a change to your appointment. Could you please clarify what you'd like to do? Are you looking to reschedule it to a different time, or would you like to cancel it?
I'd like to cancel it, please.
Give me a moment. Your appointment for tomorrow, February 17th, 2025 at 2 p.m. has been successfully canceled.
All right, cool. So if you see there, it kind of tripped up a little bit, and that's sort of normal for a prompt that is only this long. So I'm leaving a lot of room for error here, and then also just the audio setup I have, sometimes it gets tripped up, but when I call on my phone, it reacts pretty predictably, but very powerful. So I called, I had it retrieve my information. It kind of asked me for a phone number. I kind of wanted it to assume that it's the phone number I'm calling from, but maybe that's something I can improve in the system prompt. And then it went out and it tried to, I told it to cancel it, but it seemed like we had like an audio issue. And then once I confirmed, hey, yeah, please cancel it, it went ahead and canceled it. So it's pretty powerful, and you can see it can work wonders for somebody, maybe like a salon, or a barbershop or something. People who have appointments, a chiropractic agency, a med spa, who are consistently dealing with appointments, appointment notifications, appointment booking, appointment rescheduling. This can be an incredibly powerful tool for somebody to use. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and provide this entire template for free. Down in the description, check out the link. And then, yeah, if you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me plenty. And hopefully you enjoyed that. Until next time, peace.